let me just start out by making a point that too many people forget, and I insist that you never forget. 3 years ago, we had the lowest number of border crossings in decades. And there was a reason why we had such a low number of border crossings 3 years ago. It's because we had a president who had implemented 4 very simple policies that led to that dramatic decrease in illegal border crossings. One is to end catch and release. Another is to implement Title 42. Another is to implement the Remain in Mexico policy. And the other is to build a border wall. And maybe you could add to that an attitude that if you want to come to the United States of America, come here legally, not illegally. And as soon as President Biden took office, he eliminated all of those policies that President Trump put in place, and also issued basically an open invitation to anybody in the world that they can come here to the United States and cross our border illegally with no consequences. And the result was extraordinarily predictable. And that is, this past year, we saw the highest number of illegal immigrants ever who were apprehended coming across our border. Well, Texas is stepping up. And we have done more than any state has ever done. And there's a reason for it. Texans, as well as our fellow Americans, they are furious about the lawlessness caused by President Biden's open border policies. And they should be angry about that. And it's because of that that I declared border security to be an emergency item this session for us to not only address, but to address quickly because of the need for us to be even more proactive to deal with the border. There are several reasons why we need to be more proactive. The upcoming elimination of Title 42 is going to be bringing even more people across our border. It is expected to expire in May. According to federal estimates themselves, they said that once Title 42 is eliminated, we can expect up to 18,000 people crossing the border a day. Calculate that, and that would be more than 6 million people crossing the border a year because of the elimination of this one last bar to people coming across the border. The magnet will just continue to increase. And we're seeing that occur as we speak. In January, the numbers are always low about the number of people coming across the border. We've already seen upticks in what has happened from January to February. And we have information about people who are in Central America right now making their way toward the border. And we are working on strategies to make sure that Texas is going to be prepared. To the extent that any of this information gets beyond our borders, we're sending a message today. And that is, if you're coming toward the United States of America and you are thinking about crossing our border and you're thinking about making your border crossing in the state of Texas, you're picking the wrong state to enter into or to try to enter into, because we're going to do everything we can to keep you out of our border, to keep you out of our country. But I want to give you an example of how the increase has occurred in just the time period since right before Biden took office till today. In February of 2020, in the 1 week, February the 12th of 2020, in the entire border, there were 3,985 people apprehended. Is that entire border? The Texas border. 3,000, so under 4,000 people apprehended coming across the Texas border in February of 20, which was the last February that President Trump was in office. The first February that Biden was in office, it went from 3,985 to 13,672 in just 1 week in February, that very same week. And then the year after that, that very same week, it jumped to 21,560. And so it went up about fivefold, 5 times in just that 1 week period, year after year after year, because of Biden's open border policies. Well, what Texas has done is we have deployed the Texas National Guard far more than any state ever in the history of the United States of America to repel and to turn back people who are trying to cross the border illegally. We have deployed the Texas Department of Public Safety, and they have arrested more than 25,000 criminals who got past the Border Patrol. Had DPS not been on the border making these arrests, there would have been dangerous criminals who got away into the United States or into the state of Texas that would have posed a very serious danger to our populace. And so we thank DPS for doing that. In addition to that, altogether, they have apprehended more than 330,000 gotaways who got away from the Border Patrol or otherwise got through the gaps. And so once again, had DPS and the National Guard not been there, that would have been hundreds of thousands of more people who were able to get into the country illegally. But most prolifically is what DPS has done with fentanyl, because DPS alone has seized enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in the entire United States of America. Had DPS not seized that fentanyl that got past Border Patrol, there's no telling how many Americans would have died because of that fentanyl spread across the streets of our country. Also, to accelerate the crackdown on the Mexican drug cartels, the real cause of all of this, I declared them as terrorist organizations to empower Texas law enforcement to use advanced strategies to go after not just the cartels, but all of their assets that are here in the state of Texas, so we can do everything possible to put these Mexican drug cartels out of business. And then to help relieve small border towns, Del Rio and places like that, that have no capability to house and take care of the thousands of migrants who are dropped in their communities by Border Patrol. That led to the busing operation to relieve the congestion in these small communities where we are busing the migrants that were dropped off by Border Patrol to self-identified sanctuary cities in other parts of the United States. It is kind of interesting that one of the locations where we were dropping them off to, New York, condemned Texas for busing them to New York, only to learn that New York is now busing them to Canada. And then on top of all that, Texas is the only state in the history of the United States of America that has ever built its own border wall. We have been in the process over the past year of acquiring rights on land owned by private landowners that will allow us to accelerate the process of building the border wall over this coming year. There's a possibility, depending upon how the construction process works, where by the end of this calendar year, Texas as a state may have added more border wall than the Trump administration did for the United States of America during his 4 years in office. Bottom line is that the Texas National Guard and DPS troopers, they are working around the clock under the leadership of Major General Seltzer and Colonel McCraw. And now also, Texas has done something no state has ever done. I announced last month that we have our own border czar, the man to my left, Mike Banks. He served in the Border Patrol in leadership positions for about 23 years, and he brings a high level of expertise. It's important to emphasize that on his first day in office, he spent more time on the border as the Texas border czar than Kamala Harris, the federal border czar, has spent in years in office. Not just that, but he operates right here out of Wasleco, and he's up and down the border every single day, working and collaborating not just with DPS and the National Guard, but working with local officials, whether they be mayors or county commissioners or sheriffs. And so Texas as a state is now operating more in sync with local communities better than we ever have because of the role of coordinator that Mike Banks, the Texas Board of Czar, is playing. And very importantly, listen, this is an issue for the state of Texas to deal with. And we have to deal with it only because the federal government is not doing its job. And now that we're in session, we have the leadership of the state legislature that are fully engaged. And with us include Senator Birdwell and Representative Guillen. And I appreciate what they've done before. They've already issued analyses and reports even long before today about what's going on the border. But we will be working in collaboration with them over the course of the remainder of the session on this emergency item to make sure that Texas is doing everything we possibly can to secure the border.